how they are being affected negatively by the market economy at large,
they actually, on average, hold a steadfast commitment to its principles based on nothing more than the traditional indoctrination. I got an email once that said to me, if you're against the free market, you're against freedom.
And naturally, I shuddered at this state of mind control that the dominant established orthodoxy has successfully imposed. Of course, this is how power is maintained, and has been maintained by the dominant established orthodoxies since the beginning of time. And the trick, again, is to condition people so thoroughly into the established value systems that any thought of an alternative is inherently ruled out without critical examination. And to show how deeply pervasive this phenomenon is, you will notice that virtually all the activist organizations in the environmental, social, and political movements of the day
always exclude the market system itself as a determinant of harmful effects. It doesn't even occur to them. Instead, they focus on individuals and certain groups or corrupt corporations, and while it is needed in a per-case basis to target problematic areas, it avoids the mechanism which is essentially creating the problem. This is the fatal flaw of what's happening in the so-called activist community today. And, as will be firmly and clearly established over the course of this presentation, the greatest destroyer of ecology, the greatest source of waste and pollution, the greatest purveyor of violence, war, crime, inhumanity, poverty, and social distortion, the greatest generator of social and personal neuroses, mental disorders, depression, anxiety, and the greatest source of social paralysis, stopping us from moving into new methodologies for global sustainability and hence progress on this planet, is not some government, it's not some legislation, it's not some rogue corporation or monopoly or cartel, it's not some flaw of human nature. It is, in fact, the economic system itself at its very foundation. The market system, monetary system, free market, capitalist structure, whatever you want to call it, is not only the source of some of the greatest social problems we face today, it is also setting us up for what could be called the terminal stage of this disease, where the pathogenic social value cancer has mutated and multiplied to a point where we are now faced with nothing less than the death or collapse of modern civilization as we know it. Now, please understand, I'm not a doomsday theorist. I'm not here looking for general knee-jerk emotional reactions to say it's the end of the world. It doesn't take a genius to see where the trends are going, the trends that the media won't talk about. And given the pattern of political, economic, and environmental negligence and abuse, we're on a collision course, which I will explain as we continue. Are there solutions to these problems? Yes, there are.
but they are so far outside of the status quo
and a threat to those in power both politically and economically that they are just outright dismissed as irrational and absurd. The self-appointed guardians of the status quo won't even hear it because it's far outside of their reference and identity. Here's a few examples of some of the things that are currently happening right now, and there's many more. These are just a few that I popped up in the mainstream media. This is where the zeitgeist movement comes in. I'm really sorry to say it. We can no longer rely on government institutions to steer us in the right direction. Every government on this planet is locked into an economically oriented social program which is self-serving, unsustainable, and destructive to one degree or another. The possibility of a smooth transition into a new enlightened social design which does not have the negative byproducts, which I'm going to talk about, is extremely limited given the options made available in the current order, meaning the legal system, the political system, etc.
Likewise, we can no longer endure
the profit-driven ethos of the corporate and financial powers which control all of our precious resources on the planet. Resources we all need for survival. Society today is sick, and the illness permeates all life systems within it. And I see the zeitgeist movement as the immune system of the social world, if you will. Thank you. Chapter 1, Diagnosis. Contrary to popular belief, evidence now shows that our early human ancestors, which predate the Neolithic Revolution, really didn't live in a state of perpetual conflict and extreme scarcity as many anthropologists early on had assumed. In fact, hunter-gatherer societies were in a very unique arrangement, immersed in both a restrictive yet self-regulating environmental paradigm. Before the advent of agriculture, there was very little control over what was available. You didn't have agriculture, you couldn't control the environment. So what happened is a natural balance was in order. And the societies themselves seemed to reflect this balance by having, in fact, non-hierarchical, non-competitive, leaderless social structures. In fact, it has been found that their value systems, their social values, were essentially based on equality, altruism, and sharing. And they literally forbid upstartism, dominance and aggression, and egoism. We know this today because of anthropological research done on remaining hunter-gatherer societies around the world, such as the Piraha, which is how it's pronunciated, out of Brazil. Amazingly, it appears that well over, and this is an important point, for anyone that tells you that the current system is natural, for well over 90% of the human being's existence, human species' existence, on this planet as we know it, we were within social organizations that did not use money, that did not have hierarchy, and they even had counter-dominance strategies where the majority would work together to shut down any individual that was trying to gain power and control. Pretty much a reverse of what we have today. The Neolithic Revolution changed all of that. It provided human beings with an ability to control their environment more intently. The sustenance of life could now be cultivated essentially at will. Now, while this advent would appear as a profound benefit to all, it also introduced some pesky social problems as a result of conditioning attributes which we still deal with today. In the view of anthropologist and professor of neurology at Stanford University, Dr. Robert Sapolsky, hunter-gatherers have thousands of wild sources of food to subsist on. Agriculture changed all of that, generating an overwhelming reliance on a few dozen food sources. Agriculture allowed for the stockpiling of surplus resources and thus, inevitably, the unequal stockpiling of them, stratification of society, and the invention of classes. Thus, it has allowed for the invention of poverty. Since this dramatic change in the structure of human society, the creation of imbalances has continued, and social stratification and income inequality are now staples of the modern world, as we all know. In fact, many who are unfamiliar with human history would probably consider these attributes, again, to be part of some natural human order. It's so pervasive today. We have gone from food cultivation to commodity bartering to gold exchange to metal-backed certificate exchange to fiat currency. We went from a system with values reflective of true natural processes to a system of values based on certificates of ownership traded for income on their own, virtually, or I would say not even virtually, completely decoupled from physical resources. And we have come from a world based on necessity and social drive for preservation and sustainability to a world based on strategic manipulation, pointless materialism, and an obsession with property and ownership. Moreover, scarcity is now a driving force for commerce. In our system, scarcity equals profit.
The less there is of something, the more it can be valued in terms of money.
In other words, abundance is a negative thing in the profit system. In the words of anthropologist Marshall Shallens, the market industrial system institutes scarcity in a manner completely unparalleled and to a degree nowhere else approximated, where production and distribution are arranged through the behavior of prices and all livelihoods depend on getting and spending. Insufficiency of material means becomes the explicit, calculable starting point of all economic activity. Likewise, I would like to point out as a simple aside that the money supply in America at all times has less in value than the outstanding transactions required. In other words, there isn't and never will be in the American money supply or most other money supplies on the planet enough money in existence at any one time